And let me point one thing, which is once again said to us. The motion is there only good things coming from building a mosque? And we are saying yes. And what we have on the other side is, no, sometimes bad things could happen with anything. If you are going to build gym, some people could broken their arms, so don't do this. It's silly, it's a silly argument. We are talking about the principles, and the principles are, for the future of Greece, it's good to build the mosque because this is the reality of a pluralistic society with dignity and respect for all the citizens.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I wanted to pick up on Tariq Ramadan's last point there. It would depend, wouldn't it, about the gym, whether or not there was a history in this set of gyms of teaching people how to break arms. It would depend whether arm breaking were part of the curriculum. And it would be a very silly person who, if it was part of the curriculum in that particular gym, kept going anyway. Somebody in the audience asked if the fact that I'm an atheist is anything to do with this. I've no idea. It's possible, as it were. It's possible that because I have friends, among them people who've left Islam in Britain and in Western Europe recently, and as a result fear for their lives in Britain and in Western Europe recently, it's possible that I have an extra sensitivity to it, because yes, I've seen some of the hard edges of what Islam does in Europe today to people who try to leave their religion. The reason why there are a lot of people who are very worried about Egypt in its next phase, I'm not one of them, I'm generally rather positive about the direction that Egypt and other countries will be able to take now that they've thrown off, in some cases, the dictators. Nevertheless, the reason why there is some fear is because of the terrorist movement started by your grandfather, Tariq, which poses such a threat to the Muslim Brotherhood, to Egypt and Egypt's future, because some of us are very fearful that, like the Brotherhood's offshoot, the Hamas in the Gaza, they will have one election once and murder the opposition, as the Hamas did. Finally, this has to be said. Tariq Ramadan said, the only word I know is pluralism. It appears that isn't the only word he knows. He also knows the word smear. He knows, and I think you clearly underestimate this audience if you think you simply have to come to Greece and say that your opponents are pro-Israel lobby and that you'll be able to turn against them. How on earth can somebody who charms the people and tries to tell people that he is a progressive Muslim voice come to Athens and simply try to smear any opponent of his point of view by saying they must be pro-Israel, secretly, behind the scenes? And if he doesn't know what he's doing on that, I can assure him that the rest of us do.
We're not used to prime ministers or presidents or pop stars or anyone else talking about what they think of Christianity or what Christianity is. But we have become used to people saying and talking about Islam and talking about it in only one register. And that is one in which no criticism can enter. They talk about it in that way for lots of reasons. But I mean, among them are, at the very top, simple fear. Yes. Simple fear that if they don't say only obliging things, they might get killed. They don't admit that very often, but that's obviously a large part of it. And another part of it is the simple desire to be seen as a lovely, liberal-minded person who's endlessly open. And that may be the silliest bit of all. Yeah. To hear these people holding themselves out, and Stephen Fry, another one, holding themselves out as critics of everything, that is very comfortable to be a critic of, and not to mention this, is the symptom of our age. I say in the book that some people who have been so used to poking at empty hornets' nests for their whole adult lives find a real hornet's nest and they run away.
That's beautifully put.
Well, let's take it like this. Thanks to the Archbishop's comments, if he saw what he wants to see, a Muslim girl born in this country would, because she was born to a Muslim family, be treated in her courts, in Sharia courts in this country, as being worth half the worth of testifying of her non-Muslim neighbour. That is what would happen. We would be ghettoizing people into implying that if you're born a Muslim, you will be run by Muslim law. If you're born a non-Muslim, you'll be run in the normal way that everyone else in the country is. The Archbishop, it's extraordinary we've got to this stage, but the Archbishop, in promoting Sharia law, apart from the fact he should resign, has made life incredibly difficult for progressive Muslims in this country who want to object to Sharia, and he's made it vastly easier for the extremists to see there's something they can get if they hold on long enough. No, this is not to do with the 95% of Sharia which its apologists say is not to do with hand chopping. The issue of Sharia, which I don't know if you're familiar with this, but if you're dealing with Sharia in this case, it is dictated in the Quran, in the second book of the Quran, that women are worth half that of men. Now, if you want to have a parallel legal system in this country, which throws out the rights accomplishments of this country, runs roughshod over them, and decides that women are worth half of you, then I resent the fact that you're trying to speak for anyone, let alone Christians.
Have you actually read the lecture, and did you see in the lecture?
Absolutely, I read the lecture and I found out what I could from it, and I listened to the interview he gave, in which, might I add, in his interview, he said that it was wrong that everyone should be treated under the same rule of law in this country. He said that there were problems from that. I don't think there are problems from that. I think that's one of the best accomplishments we've got, that everyone is equal before the law. And the head of your church is saying that it should be different.
You are doing, Mr.
You think
Murray,
it's Islamophobic to point out that we think that women should be treated equally to men?
Let me finish. The people should understand, and our fellow citizens should understand, that the Muslims are not asking for a parallel system, and there are many interpretations relating to Sharia, and it's much more open than that, and don't come with something which is a superficial discourse.
Okay, well, Suhaib Hassan was on the television last Sunday night.
Not acceptable.
Last Sunday night, Suhaib Hassan from the Islamic Sharia Courts of Britain was on the televisions across this country on Channel 4 saying that he would like in the end for people to be flogged, beheaded, hands chopped off, all that stuff. We know that's where it leads, Mr. Ramadan. We know where it leads.
You are just using the controversy to spread fears in the British society.
There is a good reason to be fearful of Sharia, Mr. Ramadan.
Ms. Murray?
No, I couldn't disagree more. I'm elated by the death of Osama bin Laden. As I think any decent person should be. I think this doesn't demean America. It reminds people of who has been right in this conflict, who the victim is, and who the perpetrator is. Osama bin Laden did not allow any of the 3,000 people in New York and Washington on 9/11 any rights. He took away every single right that any of the people in those cars or their families had. He didn't grant any rights to the families or the victims of the 7/7 subway and bus bombings, which he inspired. It went on, and it's a good thing that the story has now finished. It was military forces that were sent into that compound, and soldiers are trained to fight, and they're trained to shoot and to kill. And if this had been a police operation, then we would have sent police in. America would have sent police in. Pakistan would have sent some police into the building. But it was Osama bin Laden. They knew it wasn't a police operation. It was an army operation. And in an army operation like that, it's very likely that shooting is going to occur, as it did from both sides apparently, and that somebody's going to get killed. But I just want this absurdity of all the time of treating people who have broken every single aspect of the rule of law, who then, when they're killed, suddenly all of these people come out and say the rule of law must be applied to Osama bin Laden. We have to remember who the victim is and who the perpetrator is in this. Yasmin says about, we must show, as it were, our principles. We must show that we're better than them. We are better than Al-Qaeda. We don't have to show that, Yasmin.
No, you do.
Yasmin, just wait a second. But the point is what Yasmin is doing, and what many people are doing at the moment, is holding America and our allies to such a uniquely high standard that no society could ever live up to it. That even the worst enemy of a society has to be buried according to the customs that they would want. I can't raise it in me, Yasmin, to think that whether or not the customs around his burial were perfect in your eyes is the most important thing in the bin Laden story.
Then you are as barbaric as them.
Well, we're not as barbaric
you
as
are
them.
as barbaric
Of
as
course
them.
we're not. What? Because we don't do the exact Islamic burial,
think
we're
you're
as
better,
barbaric.
you're no better.
It's as if we'd flown planes
You're
into
no
buildings.
better.
This is
You are
moral
no
relativism
better.
gone mad. It's worse than moral relativism. It's an inversion of morality.
You can't choose your morality. Bits. You can't choose bits of it.
Well, you do.
I don't.
You do,
I
and you
live by the
decide. You decide to apply moral norms to societies that you dislike, which you wouldn't apply to others.
I'm critical of all people who behave barbarically.
And some worse,
We are
some
not
more than
better.
others. Yes.
No, it's
some
not
worse
true.
than others.
And I think this is an important thing to talk about. To immigrants, he did exactly the same thing that Mr. Glass did. He treated us as a society as if we were a society that just abuses immigrants, that imprisons them, locks them up. I don't know where he gets that from. I see immigrants all across our streets, many of whom are doing very well. Most people in Britain have welcomed them. There hasn't been mass violence against these immigrants. By and large, they have been welcomed. How does that happen? How would the reverse happen in Saudi Arabia? How would the reverse of that happen in any Islamic culture? Why is it that every Jew in the Middle East has had to go to Israel? Why is it that we have made the de facto agreement that if there is to be a Palestinian state, it has to be Judenrein, clear of Jews? Because we treat them by a different standard, ladies and gentlemen, and we know it, and we will not do what we need to do, which is to say this is what works for us, and this is, we believe, what could work for other people. Mr. Ramadan said that we need dialogue. I agree. Everyone agrees we need dialogue. But where does it start? Would it start, for instance, with making a joke, contra Mr. Khomeini, not a very funny man? Or would it start with an article, perhaps? Would it start, perhaps, with a film? It did, a few years ago, with Submission, and Theo van Gogh was killed. Could it start with making a joke, perhaps? A joke in a cartoon? Well, apparently not. Because we know that there were burnings and killings and lootings and riotings across the globe in reaction to those cartoons. If you're going to start a dialogue, what could you do that would be smaller than drawing a cartoon? If anyone has an idea, please let me know. But this dialogue, which we keep on being offered, is not reciprocated. And we can have the dialogue here in the West tonight. But how many of the countries that will be talked about by the other side could we have the same dialogue in? We get to discuss our failings because we are in the West. We get to analyse our failures because we are here, and I think that matters.
It's also really a privileged position to stand here and say that there are citizens in this country by virtue of their ethnic origin who can have their citizenship withdrawn from them. It is
there is something that's nothing to do with ethnic origin.
It is a racialised conception of citizenship that says that you can take away people's citizenship.
No, that is completely
their origins are not native.
That is completely unacceptable. We're talking about behaviour.
Can I ask? The only reason that we can consider taking away his citizenship is because we do not regard him as fully British. And that is a racialised conception.
If I could just correct that.
That's correct me,
the problem about what Miriam's just said, among other things, is you can do the thought experiment another way. Let's say a pseudo-state was set up in another country in the world.
It's not a state.
I know it's not a state. You know it's not a state. They think they're a state. They call themselves a state. And a lot of people who burn their passports or go over to fight for them believe they are a state. Let's pretend another pseudo-state was set up from any other religious or other kind of background. If people from Britain were going to that state of any background or any origin, and they were cutting off people's heads and raping women and children and so on, I think this country would take a rather tough stance about it. And I think, among other things, one of the things we would look at was withdrawal of passports, among other things. If you say you are signed up to this appalling state, then maybe we take you at your word.
Miriam's case is there is a racial element.
But there should not ever be.
But
I think something Miriam said that we really must come back on is that somebody is not considered fully British.
Absolutely.
You are either British or you're not.
Well, then you can't withdraw somebody's citizenship. They're British citizens and we have to deal with it.
If I can say so, not only has it not got anything to do with race, but the bit that Miriam has not mentioned, which it has a very great deal to do with, is religion. This has a great deal to do with religion, and we have not so far discussed the religious aspect of this, because Islamic State calls itself Islamic State for a reason. They follow certain principles, misguided in your opinion, misguided in my opinion, but certain principles that they say they derive from Islam.
All right,
and any discussion of this has to take them at their word to some extent.
Well, I mean, I think it's very interesting that we would sort of try and essentialise Islamic State. They're very much like any cult or, if you like, I think you can look at their origins. If you compare them to any sort of cult or gang, there are usually some similarities with the broader concept from which they're derived. So you get cults that are derived from Christianity. Sure. Very similarly, you would say that Daesh or Islamic State is derived from Islam in some way.
Yeah.
But I think the problem is to take things at face value and to corroborate their narrative by accepting their view that it is a state and that they have the legitimacy to call themselves Islamic. It's problematic.
The Waco group in Waco some years ago, everyone was interested in the religious claims they were making when they decided to become this millenarium crazy cult. If I can just finish. This is a crucial thing we cannot avoid. I know it's uncomfortable. I know we want to keep avoiding it, but the religious aspect, which Miriam didn't want to talk about, is a vital part of this discussion. And it's reliant upon Muslims of all kinds to take that on and tackle it.
You don't have to go very far in Britain or the West in general at the moment to find people's unwillingness to assert the superiority of their values. But they know the superiority of their values because they live with the superiority of their values. I talk at a lot of campuses, and I was at one last night in London where a student got up and started protesting because I had said that an Islamist government was of itself a bad thing, which I think it is. I just said to this student, and it's not a hard question you'd have thought to ask, I just said, well, name me one Islamist government state that you would want to live in. And this is a serious question, ladies and gentlemen. It is also a personal question, and one which, if people were honest, they would admit is personal. As a gay man, there's not a country that's run by Muslims which I could live in. One of my best friends is in hiding again tonight, Dayan Hirsi Ali, because of what she says, and she'd be killed if she went to any Muslim country. And I think that matters. And I think the way in which it affects our personal lives does matter, and we should not ignore it. We have the great blessing of living under this system, and we take it for granted, and we spit on it, and we can because we're living in that freedom. But I beg you, ladies and gentlemen, not to pretend that that means that we shouldn't assert the superiority of that system, because that is what it is. It is a superior system. It doesn't, I would stress this, it doesn't have to be violently asserted. Rights and values are not asserted by violence. They are asserted by showing people your rights. They are shown by example. If you do not speak up for your rights, if you do not say that you think that the rights that you enjoy should not be enjoyed by other people, or people with darker skin, or people in other countries, then I submit that you make a great error of judgment. Mr. Glass treated us to a textbook example of Western masochism. And I know some people in the hall enjoy that, because some people laughed and clapped when he cited Western civilization and epitomized it by what? World War, Nazism, Abu Ghraib, Guantanamo. Ladies and gentlemen, if you believe that the West should be treated and regarded only as something which is treated by its lowest moments, and believe that all other cultures and all other civilizations should be treated only by their highest moments, you're already putting in an unequal challenge here. But in Iran, when a couple was shot the other week for holding hands when not being married, the courts congratulated them. Ladies and gentlemen, it does not need you to want to assert your morals violently, to say that that stinks and we will not be a part of it.